Free agency reports continue to escalate surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs, and a new report has revealed a new Leafs target. And who this target is might surprise you. So, to break down that target and discuss whether or not he'll be a good fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But before we do, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button. It's free. It means the world to Darius and myself, so make sure to do that. But Darius, let's just dive right into it. And this player is very interesting. Again, we think every day about the Mitch Marner trade, the Robertson trade, and what needs to happen for the Toronto Maple Leafs to put themselves over the top and see some playoff success next season. They're still lacking depth on the wings. They're still lacking just depth in general from the forward positions. And this is an interesting guy here. And you can see this here. A report dropped, or a rumor, regarding Evgeny Kuznetsov. And he's been a name that's been very interesting in the NHL, really, over the past year or so. And this is going to, I know a lot of Leafs fans right now are probably watching this a little bit either excited or confused. And Darius, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. But basically, you can see here, the Maple Leafs are hoping they can make it back to the playoffs next season after an underwhelming finish when, of course, they lost the Bruins in Game 7. And it basically links with the recent news that forward Evgeny Kuznetsov had come to a mutual agreement with the Carolina Hurricanes to terminate his contract. Rumors immediately began to circulate as to where he may end up signing next, and there was a belief he could go to the KHL, but a recent report indicated that he could end up back in the NHL this upcoming season, and he could sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, Darius, a very interesting player, not controversial, but a bit of a player that has had an interesting history here. What are your thoughts on a potential Kuznetsov signing in Toronto?
Well, like you said, I've seen it online already. A lot of people are confused or they're really excited about it. And I fall into the confused category, at least at first when I first saw it, because I didn't understand how this move would make any sense or even be possible. Because at first I saw that, he came to an agreement with the Carolina Hurricanes to terminate his contract on an agreement basically that he was going to sign in the KHL. Now, through a report yesterday out of Russia, it sounds like he's not going to sign that contract or it's been delayed or something like that. So he could actually make his return or I guess it's not really a return. He would just stay in the NHL and sign a new contract with somebody else. So that could be really interesting for the Toronto Maple Leafs because he's not going to make a lot, right? We saw what happened last year with the Washington Capitals. They said, this guy makes far too much for our team. We got to shed him. They ended up retaining a lot of salary, sent him to the Carolina Hurricanes. So, he was making about 4 million with the Carolina Hurricanes, a little bit less than that. So I think on his next contract, because of his age and all these other factors, I think he's going to make, not league minimum, but he's going to make significantly less. So he could be an option for the Leafs, right? They could afford him, especially with, we keep talking about it. Nick Robertson could be on his way out and he isn't signed yet. So they do have some salary cap space to spend on this. Because like you said, they are a little bit thin on the wings. If everything goes right, then yes, it looks pretty good on the wings, but that is if everything goes right. And with the Leafs, usually it does not. So you have to prepare for that. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's usually not. Everything usually doesn't go right for the Leafs in multiple ways. But you mentioned it. Like, if it's true regarding him returning to the NHL, it kind of changes everything and changes the landscape for what teams are going to be involved in him in his, services. And you look at the his stats here. Quite frankly, he's still a decent player, and it's at the point now where if he decides to return to the NHL, the good thing is that for him, at least contract wise, the forward group has thinned out significantly since his original report that he was going to be returning to wherever he ends up going to in the KHL. But Darius, this is it's very interesting to me, and you mentioned it. The KHL thing is the most intriguing part. Like, he got bought out from the Carolina Hurricanes. He was supposed to be bought out to go to the KHL, but now maybe he saw an opportunity to get paid a decent amount of money in the NHL. Sorry, too many AHL, NHL, in the NHL. And I think it would be, and I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think it would be a decent fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs? Now, from a player perspective, put everything aside, I think at this point, maybe you'd rather Alex Nylander or someone like that, but he brings a veteran presence. And again, you can see he had 8 goals, 16 assists. He's 32 years old. He's not like super old. It seems like, when I first think of him, I think he's 35, 36. He's only 32 years old. He still has some life left. He's not going to score a ton, but he could be a decent depth option at the league minimum here. I think it could make some sense for the Leafs, even though I would prefer probably an Alex Nylander type. If it ends up being this guy, I wouldn't be completely upset, albeit a little confused.
Yeah, if you look at like someone like Alex Nylander, it's very cost effective, right? For the Maple Leafs, they're going to be saving money there, and he's going to give you some scoring, right? That's great. But if you look at Kuznetsov, he's been, he's Stanley Cup champion, he's won Stanley Cup, he scored some pretty timely and big playoff goals, right? He did last year, and he has throughout the years, so he brings that to the table. He's not going to do anything crazy offensively now for you in the regular season. He's relatively young. Like I wouldn't sign him to a 5-year contract or anything like that, but he is still relatively young. Like the legs are still there. He can still play. Obviously a shootout specialist, so that could help the Leafs as well. So, there's a lot to like there. Obviously, there's some stuff, off the ice. We don't have to get into it in this video, but there might be some concerns there. So maybe they don't want to look at that, but I think it's an interesting option. If we're just talking on ice, on paper, it's an interesting option for the Leafs because it gives them more of a definite answer at left wing because, we've talked about, does Matthew Knies take a step? We don't know, right? Is Bobby McMahon going to continue to play at the level he was? We don't know. Like we don't have answers there. We don't have 100% answers. We do know what Marner, Matthews, and Nylander are going to bring to the table every year. We know that, right? We can project that. But in terms of especially the left wing position, we don't know. So this could add a little bit of stability in that way, right? And obviously brings, I keep saying they need to add guys who've won the Stanley Cup. He's done that. So there's a couple things to like, but it would be an interesting fit, I think. Very interesting.
Yeah, and we're just focusing on the hockey perspective, not the other stuff that's happened. But you kind of mentioned, and you can see here, bringing in Kuznetsov would allow the Maple Leafs to experiment a bit with the lineup. Bobby McMahon, Matthew Knies, all these guys, you'd be able to, if assuming that Knies and McMahon continue to improve, and I think we both agree they will, adding Kuznetsov would give them something to fall back on if the two do slow down at all. And that's the thing. He kind of brings, if you compare him to really any of the options left on the free agency market, he brings some of the most, if not the most experience, especially with the Stanley Cup winning abilities. When you're looking at the frame of this team over the next couple of years where they're really trying to win now, they signed Chris Tanev, they signed OEL. This guy kind of fits in more on that timeline where you get a year or two of his services. He's a veteran guy. He's a solid playoff performer. He can obviously mention the shootouts. Like he provides a lot more certainty, I think, than a guy like Alex Nylander would, or even anyone else left on the market. Daniel Sprong would have been a similar comparable in some ways regarding the veteran presence and things like that. So I don't mind it if everything was equal, though there is some things that kind of sway you one way or the other here that I'm not super convinced the Leafs would make, go out of their way to sign him at this point.
Yeah, and we're not even 100% sure. Like, I'm still wondering about the legality
That's
of all
assuming
of
this is
this
all
too,
true.
because
Yeah.
yeah, assuming this is all true, right? Because I'm wondering about some of the legality of it because like he said to Carolina, I'm leaving for the KHL. So they didn't buy him out. They just legally like they agreed to terminate his contract, right? So now if he said, "Hey, can you please terminate me so I can go to the KHL?" and they say, "Sure, no problem." Then he turns around and signs with another NHL team. I'm sure Carolina happy about that, and they're not going to be happy about that. So I wonder if there's something there still you have to look at. And again, these are a couple reports out of Russia too that are stating that it's been delayed or he may not sign there, right? It may end up that way. So we're just going to have to see how it falls into place. But if he does become available and he can return to the NHL, then it's something that the Leafs should at least look at because they are lacking. He's a left shot, he's left wing, they're lacking in that department.
Yeah, and you saw when I was going through a bunch of screenshots here, you can kind of see like there's multiple articles linking him and saying that they should sign him. They're urged to sign the Stanley Cup champion. You can see here the Leafs are going to be chomping at the bit to get a guy like this. And there's going to be many other teams, probably half the teams in the NHL at this point, who would like to get him at a $1 million contract just because of the intangibles that he brings, assuming everything works out with that. But let us know in the comments, do you want to see him or do you want to stay far, far away? Let us know. Thank you guys for watching. See you soon.